The quick release skewer, something which is often overlooked by many cyclists out there and often not used correctly too. Now it provides an ultra important mechanical function as well as a very important safety function too. So let's take a closer look at what it is and how we use it correctly. Let's look then at the most commonly found quick release skewer out there, a flip type lever. Now there are other types available, but for ease of visual explanation, this is certainly the easiest to actually explain. So you can see that the handle of the lever is actually kind of shaped in such a way that when you open and close the lever, it pushes against this washer type system and essentially closes a gap of between 1.5 millimeters to 2 millimeters. Now it doesn't sound a lot, but that 1.5 or 2 millimeters actually holds your wheel in place. So let's go a little bit further in depth. So how do we actually use them then? Well, firstly, I'm going to take this bike out of the work stand. The reason being is because sometimes with the bike elevated, the actual hub does get misaligned inside of the dropout of the frame. So the axle is not sitting squarely in there. Whereas if you have the weight of the bike pushing down on the axle, it finds its way into the dropout, normally in the correct position. Now if we actually look at the quick release skewer, it does consist of a few different parts. Obviously we've got the lever or the handle here, then we've got this serrated type washer. Then on the other end there's a little adjustable nut and then two little springs on side of this rod. Now these springs are shaped like little cones if you see, so a wider end going narrower. The narrower end actually sits in the most central part of the bicycle, so they go up against the hub axle. And why do they do that? Well, it's to keep the skewer nice and centralised. So when you put a wheel in, the skewer doesn't need any adjustment either way. It simply needs that little adjustment here from the adjustment knob. Now, these wider ends actually sit there inside of a recess, both in here as well as in there. So it's important to get these around the correct way. So let's get started then. Well, first up, let's remove that adjustable nut or the locking nut from one end of the skewer. And then make sure you keep that little spring somewhere safe too when that comes off. And then from the non-drive side of the actual hub or the wheel, so that's the side on the left if you're sat above the bicycle, insert the skewer and that little spring, making sure of course that the narrow end of the cone-shaped spring is going on first, like so. Now if you're unsure which side is the left or the non-drive side of the bike, some tyres actually have a directional arrow, so you can use that, or maybe you've got a little magnet on top of one of your spokes, so that's generally on the right hand side of the fork. I don't know why actually we do that, but that just seems to be the way in which it's been done for many years. Although some tyres, they're not even directional, so just bear that in mind too. Then, actually with the skewer, sometimes you just need to give it a little bit of pressure from that side. Put the little spring on, of course making sure that you've got the narrowest end on first, and then simply give that adjustable nut a few turns. Then we're ready to put it inside the dropout of the bike. So now the skewer is in place, as you can see, it's perfectly centralised, and that's the function of those springs. So even if I push either side, it does return to its central place. Now it's time to actually put the wheel inside of the dropout of the fork or the frame. So providing you haven't tightened up that adjustable nut too much, the wheel will find its way into the dropout of either the frame or the fork really easily, like so. Now the incorrect way of using a skewer, and something which I quite often see, believe it or not, is for a skewer to be in the open position, so this one, and then someone just fully winds that on, like so, and goes out and rides. That's not the idea of a quick release skewer. This is the correct way. So you are going to have the skewer in the closed position, gradually wind it on in place so that both sides are touching, and then open it and then just rotate the adjusting nut a couple more times, and then when you close that skewer you want it to be fairly firm, so enough that it gives you a slight indentation on your palm or just changes the colour there, and also you actually tuck it away just behind the fork leg. Something I've seen people do in the past is actually have it so that it's in line with the foreleg. I'm not going to do it because I don't have enough strength to undo it really. And then in the depths of winter, not be able to open that when they've got numb, cold hands. So that's not what you want to be struggling at the side of the road with. So just bear that in mind and just position it just behind the actual fork leg. Again, making sure that it's not super tight, and also importantly, it's not really loose. So what's the danger then of having a quick release skewer too loose? Well, if it's on the rear wheel, you're not going to get ideal power transfer because the wheel could have a tiny amount of flex in there. And then on the front wheel, well, actually you are at risk of that wheel falling out, because most modern bikes, they do in fact have these little tabs on the inside of the dropout called lawyer tabs, which prevent a wheel from dropping out even in the undone position. But if it's undone, it still could slowly undo a little bit more, then you could find that wheel popping out. So make sure it's done up plenty tight enough. If you can do it up with one finger, that's not tight enough. Really, you want to have the palm of the hand to be able to close it. Now, where to place the rear skewer lever then? Well, my preferred position is like so in between the chainstay and the seat stay, keeping it out of harm's way. So when I was a young boy growing up, I spoke to a professional cyclist and he told me that was the way to do it. The reason being, if a rider was coming from behind and then they suddenly move their front wheel, they can actually open up the lever. If that was to happen, I think both riders would fall off, but it's always stayed with me. I appreciate though that not all quick release skewers and frame designs do allow a lever to be positioned in such a way. If so, then well, I would probably move it and have it facing forwards, but again, not actually up against a frame tube, because that's not easy to actually undo. So instead, just possibly down beneath the actual chainstay itself, like so. Now, a final little tip, which can help a few people out there, is to actually grease your quick release skewers, so the actual rod of it, before you insert it into the hub. Why? Well, it can in fact reduce any creaking noises that you can hear when you're out of the saddle giving it some. So just bear that in mind if your quick release skewers are giving you a little bit of a creak. Now, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Give it a like, a share and a thumbs up to let everyone know about it, as well as don't forget to check out the GCN shop at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com, where we have a whole heap of goodies for you. Make sure you subscribe as well, so click on the logo on screen right now. And if you haven't already done so, click on the notification bell so that you get a little alert every time we post one of our awesome videos. And now for 2 more great videos, how about clicking down here and down here.